going to do? No more Mr. Fox. No, we are going to read a new book from Roald Dahl. Yay! We are going to read another book from Roald Dahl. Ta-da! My favorite author in the whole world, Roald Dahl. Yay! This story is about two horrible, terrible, nasty people. It's called dun, 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 dun. The Twits. The Twits? What does the Twits mean? The Twits means los cretinos. Los cretinos? Cretinos are like idiotas. Cretinos. Oh! Did Mrs. Mojoli say a bad word? Not really. It's just a nasty word. We're going to hear a lot of nasty words in this book. Uh-oh. Are we going to get in trouble? No, you won't. Because I am the one that is going to say the nasty words. You're just going to listen the nasty words, okay? So I'm going to be the one saying the bad words. Ooh, they're not really that bad. But this is the story about the Twits by Roald Dahl. And that man there, so handsome, is Mr. Twit. And this beautiful, beautiful lady is Mrs. Twit. Isn't she gorgeous? Hermosa. So beautiful. Okay, let's see what this story is all about. Are you ready? How do you outwit a twit? Mr. and Mrs. Twit are the smelliest, nastiest, ugliest people in the world. They hate everything except playing mean jokes on each other, catching innocent birds to put in their bird pies, and making their caged monkeys, the mugglewumps, stand on their heads all day. But the mugglewumps have had enough. They don't just want out. They want revenge. That's how the book starts. The Twits. What was the Twits again? Los cretinos. The Twits. Illustrated by Quentin Blake. Written by Roald Dahl. This book is dedicated for Emma. Hairy faces. You see the men there? They all have hairy faces. Hairy faces. They have beards. 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 Barbas. Beards. What a lot of hairy-faced men there are around nowadays. When a man grows hair all over his face, it is impossible to tell what he really looks like. Perhaps that is why he does it. he'd rather you didn't know. Then there is the problem of washing. When the very hairy ones wash their faces, it must be as big as a job as when you and I wash the hair on our heads. So what I want you to know is this. How often do all these hairy-faced men wash their faces? Is it only once a week? Like us on Sunday nights? And do they shampoo it? Do they use a hair dryer? Do they rub hair tonic into their faces to stop it from going bald? Do they go to the barber to have their hairy faces cut and trimmed, or do they do it themselves in front of the bathroom mirror with nail scissors? I don't know. But next time you see a man with a hairy face, which will probably be as soon as you step out onto the street, maybe you will look at him more closely and start wondering some of these things. You're going to look into their beards. Mr. Twit. That is Mr. Twit. Look at his picture. Mr. Twit. El señor cretino. Mr. Twit was one of these very, very hairy-faced men. The whole of his face, except for his forehead and his eyes and his nose, was covered with thick hair. The stuff even sprouted in revolting tufts out of his nostrils and ear holes. He had hair coming out of his nose and out of his ear holes. Mr. Twit felt that this hairiness made him look terrifically wise and grand. But in truth, he was neither of these things. Mr. Twit was a twit. He was born a twit, and now at the age of 60, he was a bigger twit than ever. The hair on Mr. Twit's face didn't grow smooth and matted as it does on most hairy-faced men. It grew in spikes that stuck out straight like the bristles of a nail brush. And how often did Mr. Twit wash this bristly, nail-brushy face of his? The answer is never. Not even on Sundays. He hadn't washed it for years. Wakala. Dirty beards. As you know, an ordinary, unhairy face like yours or mine gets a bit smudgy if not washed often enough. And there is nothing so awful about that. But a hairy face is a very different matter. Things cling. They get stuck to hair, especially food. Things like gravy go right in among the hairs and stay there. You and I can wipe our smooth faces with a washcloth, and we quickly look more or less all right again. But a hairy man cannot do that. We can also, if we are careful, eat our meals without spreading food all over our faces. But not so the hairy men. Watch carefully next time you see a hairy man eating his lunch, and you will notice that even if he opens his mouth very wide, it is impossible for him to get a spoonful of beef stew or ice cream without leaving some of it on its hair. So you're going to see that there is ice cream or stew or something on the hair of the mustache or the beard of these men when they are eating. Mr. Twit didn't even bother to open his mouth wide when he ate. As a result, and because he never washed, there were hundreds of bits of old breakfast and lunches and suppers sticking to the hairs around his mouth. There weren't big bits, mind you, because he used to wipe those off with the back of his hand or with a sleeve while he was eating. But if you look closely, not that you ever want to, but you would see little specks of dried up scrambled eggs stuck to the hairs, spinach and tomato, ketchup and fish sticks and little pieces of chicken liver and other disgusting things Mr. Twit liked to eat. If you looked closer, hold your noses. You would see, ladies and gentlemen, you would see deep into the bristles of his mustache and the upper lip, you would see much larger objects that had escaped the wipe of his hand, things that had been there for months and months, like a piece of maggoty green cheese or moldy old cornflake or a slimy tail of a teen sardine. Because of all this, Mr. Twit never really went hungry, because when he was hungry, he would take his tongue out and start looking for food in his mustache. And he would look for food between the bristles of his mustache. And then suddenly he was always able to find a tasty morsel here and there and nibble it. And then he would find it and put it inside and he would bite it. What I'm trying to tell you is that Mr. Twit was foul and smelly and gross old man. He was also an extremely horrid old man, as you will find in a moment. Now I'm going to show you the pictures of how gross he is. Look at his beard, so dirty, and how he's wiping his hand, and that's full of food. Now look at this. Look at this picture, boys and girls. If you look very careful, you are going to see that is the fish, the sardine tail, and that is the piece of cheese, right? Moldy cheese, and that is a cornflake. All of this is stuck between his mustache, and that's what he eats when he's hungry, and that's how he wipes his mouth, with his hand and his sleeve. Ew! And that is the end of this part of the story. I hope you liked it. Next time we are going to meet Mrs. Twit.